Hi, I'm Roy Coughlan, and I'm the creator of the podcast. You can find everything about me and the 5 podcasts on bio.link/podcaster, and you'll find it in the QR code there. I'd also like to thank my sponsors. If you or someone you know is struggling with anxiety and want to know how to be 100% anxiety free in 6 weeks without therapy or drugs, Daniel Packard Anxiety Solution Program Company offers a 6 weeks system that permanently solves anxiety at an astounding 90% success rate. People who join the program only pay at the end once they have clear, measurable results. If you're interested in learning more, go to permanentanxietysolutions.com, where you can book a free consultation with Daniel. Do you have high blood pressure or want to get off the meds? Doctors are amazed at what Zona Plus can do. Get a $50 discount with my code ROY. Go to zona.com/discount/ROY, and you see the QR code for all my sponsors down at the end. Quality Polish manufacturer of metal products for telecommunication and workshop equipment and other metals. If you'd like a brochure, you see it in the QR code, and you just let us know if you would like a quotation shipped internationally and very competitive rates. I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast.
So this was originally supposed to be for the speaking podcast, but it's actually going to go out on the awakening and meditation as well. And you'll probably know later why I'm doing that. So my guest, I'd love to actually be able to memorize this, but I won't be able to. So you're an award-winning entrepreneur, angel investor, thought leader, and sought-after business coach. In 2008, you founded and scaled Canada's toy shop, Tech for Kids, and later co-founded Pela. Is that how you pronounce it, Pela?
Yeah, you can call it Pela for sure.
Pela. And a 100 million sustainable phone case startup, and created an entirely new category. In 21, you and your team at Pela successfully launched a record-breaking 9.8 million crowd-sourced campaign for Lomi, which I know I've done crowdfunding. That is incredible. For the world's first smart kitchen composer. So we've actually met. We were trying to, prior to recording, was it 2012 at a high performance forum with Darren Hardy in California. And then I think a year later for an elite one, or a couple of years later. And I connected with you. I remember the conversations we had. Please welcome Brad Pedersen.
So it's all good. You can't offend me. Call me whatever you want. Just don't call me names.
So how do I pronounce it properly again?
So Pedersen is the Danish way to say it, but people call me Pedersen because it's just, living where I have for so long, that's just become part of, just part of the vernacular.
Excellent. So the reason why I've decided that I want to put this on the tree is because obviously entrepreneur, like the speaking one, you've done some speaking, plenty of speaking, but also I've thought about meditation, that you do meditation, and just through your business journey and what you're doing with Lomi, I think, because with the awakening, I'm trying to just make change and make the world a better place, which I know just from listening to you, following you, I know that that's your mission as well. So I suppose, first of all, welcome to the shows.
Well, thank you for including me, Roy. We, as we were talking about, we've known each other about 10 years now. And I always was impressed by your moxie and your inventiveness. This Irishman who went to Poland and had all these businesses and hustles going on. And as I said, I'm reminded of you almost every day because you were very generous and gave me this really beautiful coin, Polish coin, I believe it is. Although I've never been to Poland, but I'm assuming it looks like it is. It's great to be reconnected again.
Brilliant. So I know I started at a young age being entrepreneurial, but just from my research, you're similar. Like, you've had a lot of businesses, but when did it begin?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's this sort of topic: is entrepreneurship something you're born with, or is it something that you learn about as you grow up? Is it nature, is it nurture? I think it's a bit of both. I know that I had sort of the advantage of the fact that, I was born a curious and a bit of a mischievous kid. I got myself into trouble as a kid, but not bad trouble, just, broke the rules, got the strap at school, that kind of trouble. Just because I was constantly pushing the boundaries of what were the real rules, what was really possible, and trying that. but I also had the privilege of being born in a family of people who had business minds and were business thinkers. So I think the combination of those two really had impact and influence on me, even though my career path was really to be a chiropractor. I was, so my father, he's a chiropractor. His father and mother were both chiropractors. And my great grandfather was actually the very first chiropractor in Denmark. So there was this like long legacy of Pedersens who were chiropractors. And ever since I was like a young lad, I was told, you're going to grow up and be a chiropractor like your daddy someday. And I just kind of nodded and said, yeah, that sounds probably right. And in fact, I, started that journey. I went to school, took my pre-chiropractic and was going down that path. And, but prior to that, I'd had all these kind of like businesses that I had started. They were real businesses, but there were ways to make money. I would sneak into golf courses at night with my snorkel gear, dive into the ponds, collect the golf balls, take them home, clean them up, put them in an egg carton, sell them for $5. I had a wood cutting business where I used my dad. So it was a perfect business. My dad's chainsaw, his truck, his gas. And then I'd go and cut all this wood, split it, and then haul it to people for $5 less in the competition. So I had all these ways that I was just being inventive of how I could create value and create my own economy. So I was inspired by the idea of that. But yeah, started down this path of being a chiropractor. And, the luckiest thing that ever happened to me is that while I was in school, I went past this beautiful woman in the hallways who later turned out to be my wife. And she had one more year left in her degree. And, she wasn't really interested in doing a long distance thing. So I said, well, I'll hang back for a year and wait for you. And then we'll go to school together. Well, you give somebody who is got entrepreneurial tendencies a year of time and capacity, they either get themselves in trouble or they get themselves in business, or maybe both. And in this case, I actually got into business and started down this sort of circuitous path of building my first real enterprise, which happened to be in toys.
Excellent. And like, I believe your wife Kelly is her name. Yeah, you work together as well. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. We're one of those rare exceptions where we, as I've come to learn, it's not that common that, husband and wives actually not only do life together, but actually work together. But yeah, she was involved. She actually helped me. So she was the financier of the very first business because she had a stable paying job early on and I did not. And so she was the one that got things going. And then later on, as we got the business up and running, she came and joined the team and we co-created the business together. So she was intimately involved in the business details right from the get-go. And to this day, we still are partners in every sort of aspect of our lives. And that's 30 years later.
It's incredible. And I mean, I know a lot of people, some people make it work, others don't. How do you have the relationship where you actually can switch off from the business and go home and have a normal conversation, or does it ever happen?
No, our pillow talk is always very interesting. It's sort of this, but here's the thing. I don't feel like we compartmentalize life. Like life should be integrated, right? If someone asks me, what do you do for fun? I would say I work. I actually enjoy work. It to me is fun. Now I also do other things. I like kite surf and I mountain bike and ski and all that kind of stuff. So I like that kind of fun, but I actually really love what I do in terms of creating value for, people on the planet. And therefore our life is really this melody of, we're working, we're playing, and it just integrates together. So you can't really tell, the lines are really blurred between what we're doing and that. But I would say, the key to that kind of a relationship being successful is number one, trust. You have to have a high level of trust. Trust comes from, transparency, that you're very vulnerable about who you are and what you're doing. So there's no surprises. The only person who likes a surprise is somebody on their birthday. So surprising your spouse is rarely good unless it's her birthday and, or an anniversary event. And then just really investing and leaning into communication. And I would say there's two things that we've done as part of our practice that we've learned that have made that relationship as strong as it is today. Number one, we have like a mandatory date night every week. Wednesday nights, can't book us. We are out for just a dinner with us, great meal, bottle of wine, and we take turns kind of planning it. So I plan, she doesn't know what's going on one week, and I kind of look forward to the surprise of that. And then the next week she does the same thing and it's a surprise for me. And so it's kind of back and forth, these small little gifts of time together that, are a bit of a surprise to look forward to. So that's number one. And then number two is every Sunday we have this mandatory connection point where we review the week. And we actually did this wrong in the beginning, but the point of review is just to become aware, and that awareness helps you create course corrections where needed. So we each come to that meeting, first of all, starting with gratitude, because you want to get an abundant mindset, thinking about all the goodness that you've had in your life. So we talk about all the things that were great. We share that with each other. And then we rank ourselves as far as how we showed up as, in my case, a husband, a father, a lover, and a provider. And then she does the exact same thing. And on hers, it's obviously a mother, but the last is that she's a homemaker now, and she really looks after the family office. And the format is what worked well. What am I really excited about this past week? What didn't work? And some self-reflection on where we're seeing some things that we didn't go as planned. And then how are we thinking about this for the week ahead? So what, now what, in terms of being able to take those learnings and actually apply it for the week ahead. And then we provide each other an opportunity to have feedback. And we've just found that those practices have done an incredible job of keeping our relationship fertile. Because I've come to learn that the opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. And apathy is actually, the Greek root of that is lack of passion. And it's really easy to see how most relationships just drift slowly through neglect. And it's not intentional. You just wake up one morning and suddenly realize that you're just different people, and why are you in this relationship anymore? So if you want it to grow, it's something that requires active engagement, fertilizing that soil for a meaningful relationship to actually grow something abundant.
Beautiful. Love it. Love it. So with the toy company that you grew, I was a Dynatech originally, and then a Tech for Kids. So you might take us through the whole journey there, because I think it's fascinating, the story there.
Yeah, look, it was, so I grew up in the prairies of Canada. Where I grew up, the only thing we really were known for were agriculture and oil. That's what you did if you grew up in that part of the world, unless you want to be a chiropractor, of course. But I was always just a big kid. I was playful. I loved just, again, I was curious, and I love things that fly. And so I read a story in a magazine about a kid who invented a toy that was a flying toy, and it could go really, really far. And it was kind of a rags riches story. I was super inspired by it. And I thought, after playing, I bought some, I played with it with my buddies, and we're like, wow, this is really cool. And then I thought, well, maybe we could sell these and market these in Canada, because I had to order them from the States. They weren't readily available here. Maybe there's an opportunity. So I contacted the manufacturer, and fortunately for me at the time, they were as naive about Canada as I was about toys. So it kind of made this perfect marriage of ignorance. I put together a business plan. They named me their distributor, and suddenly I was the Canadian distributor for this product, and I didn't have a clue. And all I needed to do was just start trying. And I found out the hard way that just trying to get these in stores was hard, because you had to tell a story. It was a very demonstrable product, and if you didn't see it work, it didn't really make sense. So with that in mind, I hired a kid. We traveled around to all these festivals and events, and I was basically a carny for a couple of years, where we would basically sell these things. But when we would stand in a field and throw it back and forth, I mean, we would sell 100, 200 a day at $10 a pop. And so it was like something that was pretty exciting, because there was cash involved and I could see the possibilities. But I also kind of came to the realization that doesn't scale. At the end of that career, I'd have just like one big arm from all the throwing of this thing. So I had to figure out a better way to market the product, to tell the story. And, it was actually the perfect product, because it really, we knew it would sell, it was the right price point. It just needed the story to be told. And so at that time, we had a very famous quarterback, Canadian Football League. I'm sure for some of your listeners, that'll seem foreign, but we actually have a football league in Canada, not footy football, but, American football. And he was a famous quarterback, and somehow through just connections, I got a hold of his agent, and we agreed to a deal where he would endorse in exchange for royalty. And I shot this videotape of him throwing this thing from end zone to end zone on a football field. And from there, we put those videotapes into stores with the product stacked around it. And it was just like amazing. Suddenly it was demonstrable, and these things were selling like crazy. And that was like the very first product. And as we created incredible traction in Canada, a number of other manufacturers started to take notice and say, hey, we need somebody to help us solve our problems in Canada. And very quickly, over, call it a 10-year period, we went from this like basement startup with one product to becoming the largest toy distributor of our kind in Canada. And along the way, we were ranked amongst the top 100 fastest growing companies in Canada 5 years in a row. I was nominated for the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award. All these accolades and things are awesome. I'm in my mid-20s, so life is good, feeling really great about how life is going. But I've come to learn that a little bit of ego can lead to a lot of overhead, and hubris is sort of like the beginning of the end in terms of any great enterprise. So in 2006, I came back from a family vacation. We just had a record year, thinking things are all great and it's going to be an amazing, next year ahead. I came back and I get a call from my business partner and the CFO at the time. He said, "Brad, we got a problem." And I'm like, "Okay, lay it on me." And basically he told me that while we'd grown the top line, we had done so at the expense of the bottom line, and that we had anemic margins that had gotten us in trouble with our debt to equity ratios with our bank. And suddenly we were upside down in our covenants. And so we went from being heroes to zeros by getting put in special loans. And I wrestled that business for 6 months, finally found someone who'd put new capital in, but they'd only do it if we went through a restructuring. And that is a fancy word for bankruptcy, where they basically try and clean up the cap table and change up the balance sheet so that you can put fresh capital in so that there's less obligations and liabilities. And of course, that was a very terrible time because I also had like $1 million of friends and family money. And so this was something that weighed heavily on me. I mean, going home at Christmas and Thanksgiving was not an easy prospect at all. And we tried to make it work with that new capital coming in. And for 2 years, we wrestled the company, and ultimately we bankrupted it in 2009. And it was really, it was an incredibly difficult time for me because so much of what we identify as entrepreneurs is that what we do is who we are, particularly as a person who birthed the business into the world. And so I had this incredible amount of shame that, my business had failed, and that, because I had lost friends and family money, that I had failed. And it was, I would say formative to, at that point in time, I could have just given up and called it a spade, said, "Hey, this is it. I've done my best and I can't do any better." But I've come to learn that rock bottom can actually be a great foundation to build from. And, I was given a task by my investors to come back with a solution to recover their money, which is not usual, by the way. When people invest money and they lose it, they typically don't put any more money in. They cut their losses and move on. But they basically said, "Look, we want to get our money back, come back with some sort of plan on how to do that." And I didn't really have a plan, but what I found is that if I sat down and just reflected on what happened, while it's hard to get clear on what you want, it's much easier to get clear on what you don't want. And so I just kind of went through the list of all the things that had gone wrong with the business and that I never, ever wanted to do again. And, sort of unconsciously, that became the foundation for this new enterprise called Tech for Kids. And Tech for Kids went from being a distributor to a manufacturer, went being focused in Canada to being global, went from having inventory in a warehouse to selling FOB direct from our factories in China. And just it was a much better business model that we launched in 2009, shortly, like the financial crisis had just happened. So the world was not an easy place then, but it actually became an amazing time as I reflect to launch a business. And so as I think about it now, that bankruptcy was my inconvenient blessing, because if I had been successful in a distribution company, while I might have continued to build a nice company, the Tech for Kids business ultimately ended up being even a better opportunity than that was. And that scaled more aggressively. It introduced me to more possibilities, new connections. I suddenly was like, "Hey, life is great." So fast forward to 2016, we've grown this, kind of the phoenix rising from the ashes, and I've got this new enterprise, Tech for Kids, but I also have investors. And the unsaid truth about raising capital is this: if you've raised outside capital, you've agreed to sell your company at some point. You've agreed to some kind of liquidity event to return the investment of those investors. And so I was getting pressure from them that, hey, we need to see some sort of way to return our capital. And, we'd gone down the path with a couple of companies to try and figure out if we could sell the company. And the toy business it's fickle, right? Things are high, they're low. It's hard to have a stable toy company. There's not too many Barbies and Hot Wheels and Legos of the world. Those are rare. Those are the exception. It's very fad driven. So it's a difficult thing to try and sell, but we reverse engineered it. We decided, hey, instead of selling the company, what if we took our company and merged it with a similar sized company, and we could optimize our operations and contribute more to top line and give overall bottom line more profitability to the enterprise, and use that as a part of a play with private equity. And we found a company in the States, a person I've been talking to over the years, I built trust with. We merged our companies together in 2017. On paper, it looked brilliant. Like literally, it was like, oh, this is a perfect marriage, and we're going to have this kind of roll-up PE opportunity. Put the companies together, and 90 days after the merger, I get fired. And it's like, what?
Sounds like a Steve Jobs situation.
Yeah, it was surreal. I founded this company. It's something, I've been in the toy business all these years, and suddenly I'm on the outside looking in. I mean, how does that happen? But again, at the time, it was horrible. It sucked. It was incredibly difficult. But as I reflect back, I've come to learn that the best gifts come wrapped in ugly paper, because while it was terrible in the moment, it ended up being an incredible gift, because through that, I got released back to the marketplace, had an opportunity to, I could have been a victim again of what had happened, but I chose to just learn from it and then start again. And also it had provided me financial freedom for myself and my family, just to have more options through the whole transaction. So this time I could be more thoughtful and take those learnings and apply to something new. And I had 3 principles that I wanted to work on. First is that I was going to put my life plan before my business plan, which all these years I had said, oh, my life is, my family is valuable, my fitness is valuable, my faith is valuable. But if you looked at my calendar, really, I was like very myopically focused on my finance piece. That was the one thing I was spending most of my time on. So I wanted to change that dynamic. The second thing I said is the no asshole rule. Only awesome people, none of what I hate, more of what I love, and less of what I tolerate. That was basically the way I was thinking about it. And then finally, third is only impact. I want to do things that actually are going to matter. I mean, toys are great. It's awesome to put smiles on kids' faces, but it's very ephemeral. And I wanted to invest in things that actually had enduring value and could have enduring value, maybe even beyond my generation. So through that lens, that's where the opportunity to become a co-founder in Pela case, which eventually led to Lomi, which you've already talked about. So Pela case was the world's first compostable phone case. And the idea being is that I'd made billions of pieces of plastic things to put smiles on kids' faces, shipped them around the planet. And this was an opportunity to do it differently, to make some recompense, make things out of materials that actually achieve a graceful end of life. And why phone cases? Well, 20 billion a year in phone cases sales. So it's a pretty significant market. And the reason that is people change up their phones every 2-3 years, right? The new model never works with the old case. So you got to get a new case. And cases are made out of these really durable materials that are meant to last a long time, more than 2 to 3 years. And so it's a perfect opportunity to test out the thesis that can we make products that have the end of life designed at the beginning. So we did it with phone cases, scaled that as a direct-to-consumer brand. And then Lomi came out of the phone case problem that we, at the end of life, where do you put your compostable phone case? Well, not a lot of people have home composting infrastructure. I mean, our ancestors did. That was a normal part of life. But today, that doesn't exist in many places. So we created a machine that would take all organic waste, food waste, as well as compostables, and turn it into a nutrient-rich soil supplement, basically in hours while you sleep. You put it in, you hit a button, wake up in the morning, you got this plant food. And and by far, actually, that's been even a bigger opportunity than the cases. And as you already talked about, we crowdfunded that. And I have also done crowdfunding campaigns in my previous life as toys. It's hard. It's a full-time thing. I mean, to get 8 figures is a pretty good outcome. That's something that you see once in a while. 9 figures, that's like actually pretty extraordinary. Like Peloton was 200,000, I think, when they did their crowdfunding campaign. But to do anything in the millions is something that's really, really extraordinary. So we just told a story that captured the imagination of the consumer, and that's been the basis of validating that we had a fit for the audience we were trying to appeal to. And we continue to scale that, knowing that with every machine we deploy into the marketplace, we have probably the world's most democratized approach at how we can address climate change, just by taking food waste and turning it into something that's valuable, that is a natural decarbonizer with the output.
Excellent. I want to delve into that further, but I just want to kind of go back a few steps and talk through, because I believe I told you my situation when we met in California, where I kind of went from, close to making 5 million to be minus 5 million and being personally liable and just going through a lot of stuff. So I kind of know what it's like, when you go through all of this. With a lot of people in the last 3 years with the craziness, there's a load of people that, through no fault of their own, were made shut their doors, or they were just kind of brought through the ground. And like with the banks, you mentioned banks restructuring. I had situations like that as well. They come in and they go, okay, yeah, we'll help you, but they don't. They're just taking the money, and they're telling you what to do. And it's like, you're making all the money, I'm doing all the work, and then at the end of it, there's nothing left. So how did you get through? And the fact that your wife was working with you as well, how did you get through that point? Because I think it will help others as well. And I'm just wondering, did meditation come into that as well? Because I know that that's how I got through it.
Yeah, look, I think those are very humbling moments when you feel that you're being targeted, and it's really easy to feel like a victim of the circumstance. So number one, I think it just comes down to reflection and taking the time to reflect. Stephen Covey in his book, The 7 Habits, has this really amazing sort of analogy to understanding what we can control versus what we can't control. And so he has this idea that there's your circle of control, your circle of influence, and then there's a circle of concern. And those are the things you can't control. And the only things that you can truly control in life are what you think, what you say, what you do, and ultimately what you choose to feel. I mean, your first feeling will be felt. You're just going to feel that feeling, but what you land on ultimately is what you get to decide based on your choices. And when you break it down to those 4 things, you kind of come to the realization that your part of what happens is relatively small to all the concerns that are going on in the greater universe. Like, I think it's important to go through life with both a telescope and a microscope, right? The telescope, where you zoom out to realize, okay, I'm a speck on this speck called Earth, that's in this speck, that's a part of this galaxy, that's in the Milky Way, that is a part of an expanding infinite universe. And relative to all of that, my issues today are pretty small, right? I mean, I don't have a lot to do with how fast we're spinning around the sun, or where we're traveling, or how we're in that overall effect of the universe. But the flip side of that, from the microscope perspective, is that I get to control those 4 things. So while I can't control the world, I can control my world. And it starts with every single day choosing an attitude of gratitude. And to what you discussed in terms of meditation, first of all, I'm going to be clear. I'm not a great meditator. I have a monkey mind. So sitting around trying to empty my mind of thoughts is not something that works well for me. But for me, the way that I've come to appreciate meditation is through mantras, and by saying things that are affirmations. And for me, that was scripture, actually, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, and particularly at this time in life where there's a lot of uncertainty, saying these words was comforting. I would just repeat to myself, trust in the Lord, lean on your own understanding, and all your ways rely on him, and he will guide your paths. And I just said that over and over and over. And it just gave me comfort to know that, there's my world, which I can control, but I have to trust in the creator, and that he's control of the circle of concern. Like, he's actually got the bigger job. Relatively speaking, mine is pretty small. And then control the things you can control. Like, I would wake up in the morning knowing that, okay, I'm in special loans. They've come to collect on the house. I can't change that, but I can choose how I'm going to show up this morning. And I think it comes down to just not stopping. It's one foot in front of the other. Get out of bed, do your meditation, go to the gym, look after your health, put positive stuff into your mind, read things that are going to help build affirmation and possibilities. And then it's amazing how the creative juices and the possibilities start to open up. But it's just about creating that fertile environment to allow things like that to grow.
Love it. And what I like as well is, I think prior to what happened to me, I kind of had the same thing, you're working hard to kind of think, okay, I'm going to be looking after my family and everything. And now it's like, I block out time when I'm with my son. I make sure I go to the gym and everything. My life has just totally changed. So it was a good lesson to learn. I know sometimes we kind of think, how can you recover from this? And sometimes you say it was a blessing what actually happened, because my life is 100 times better because of it.
Totally. Yeah. Like I said, it's my inconvenient blessings, like literally all these missteps and or misfortune that came my way. Ultimately, on the other side, they were interruptions that on the other side of that is a better version of myself. So it's understanding that, you know, pain and suffering are inevitable. You know, choosing to wallow it is optional, right? So what is the purpose of your pain, and how on the other side of that pain can you turn the adversity to your advantage, those challenges to help build your character, the struggles to actually help give you more strength, because struggles are going to happen and they're either going to beat the strength out of you or build it into you. So you get to decide what it means in the end. And I'd add one more thing to this is kind of an epiphany for me in meditation, because there's two things that I'm not very good at. And I put them together and now it works really well for me. So sitting with my mind empty is not great. I don't do that very well. And I also don't do really well with stretching. And so what I've ended up doing is putting those two things together. So every morning I get up and I do 15 minutes of listening to a meditative app. I have one's called the 1 minute pause. It's a brilliant app, and you can go for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. But it's like a prayer affirmation. And then at the same time I'm stretching, and for whatever reason, both seem better and easier. And I come out feeling refreshed and rejuvenated and ready to go into my next. So it's been a hack that I know has worked for me and may work for some of your listeners.
Brilliant. And I didn't write it down, but you mentioned something about some lesson that your father taught you, but you didn't realize it at the time, and it was later you kind of thought of what he had said to you. Yeah,
my father was a very wise man. You know, I lost him tragically in COVID a couple of years ago, so it was something that you know, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on, you know, the impact he had in my life. But he used to say a couple different things. First of all, he used to say, don't despise the process for what it'll make of you. So whenever I was going through difficulties in business, I'd call up Dad and say, Dad, this is happening. And he'd say, Brad, don't despise the process. It's making you a better person. On the other side of this pain is a better version of yourself. And I hated hearing it, but it was something that was formative. But probably the most impactful thing he ever said when I was still in I would say my late teens, he said, Brad, in life, you're going to pay one of two prices. You're going to pay the price of discipline or the price of regret. Now, I want you to know that the price of discipline is going to weigh something. It's actually going to cost you. And, you know, in the scheme of things, it's going to weigh ounces. But the price of regret will crush you under its weight and weigh tons. And those words, like, it haunted me. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, like, I don't love to be disciplined. I don't love to, like, you know, like go to the gym and work out. I've never felt compelled. I need to go suffer at the gym. On the other side, I feel great though after I do. It's the discipline of creating the habit to do it, right? But the one thing I knew I for sure didn't want to do was pay this price of regret. And there's actually a book out called The 5 Regrets of the Dying, and it's by a palliative care nurse by the name of Bonnie Rare out of Australia. And she was looking after people on their end of life, and she started to notice a pattern of the things they would talk about that they regretted. And at first, when I went to that book, I was expecting to read the stories of all the things that they maybe decisions they made or things they did that they wish they hadn't done. And the crazy part is, of the top 5 regrets, 4 of the 5 were for things they didn't do, not things they did. And it just became really, you know, poignant to me to say, okay, like, you only have one life, and every morning you've been given this gift of time. You know, and with that, you get to invest your life, which stands for leadership, influence, finance, and expertise. How can you invest your life in a way that's meaningful to take the time to ensure that you didn't spend time, but in fact, invest it? When I hear people say, I'm spending time doing this, no. You're investing time, hopefully, to create some sort of impact for yourself, for others, and for the planet around you, because it's the only real resource that's truly valuable you have is your time and attention. So be very careful where you choose to invest it.
And with the Lomi, because I think I was 26 when I bought my first house. I actually was recycling from then. I just always felt it was the right thing to do. Even though they weren't collecting it at that stage, you'd have to bring all the recycling to different areas. And what's kind of I've learned in a lot of countries, Ireland, Holland, and a few others, is they're not really recycling all the stuff when you're putting into the special bins. They're burning it all. Like, I mean, it's all a farce. So when I see what you're doing, I go, ooh, this is good, because one, it's helping the crops, like if you're doing it in your own garden. And I suppose it's like the washing machine, the dishwasher of, I don't know, the last 20, 30 years. It's just normal to see it. And I'm hoping to see that as well. So I suppose let's go into detail, explaining exactly how it works and what you can put into it.
Yeah. Well, just because I know part of your thesis is conspiracy theories and unpacking what's real and not real. If you want to take a deep dive someday, go into the recycling industry. And it was founded by big oil companies. The incentives have always been aligned with ensuring that their business doesn't get interrupted. One could argue it's the greatest greenwashing scam in our history. I mean, after 40 years of practicing, because that's how long we've been working with recycling basically since the 70s, and it became sort of known and institutionalized in the 90s. And after all that time and practice, right, in North America, we have about a 6% recovery rate, and nothing's ever recycled twice, right? I know in Europe, it tends to be better, different places around the world, but the vast majority of it ends up incinerated, ends up in landfill. It's crazy. But what it does do is it gives the consumer a sense of I'm okay with what I consume because I've got these bins that magically take it away, and they just end up back in the ecosystem some way. And it's actually, unfortunately, not happening. So if you go back to our ancestors, right, everything that they made were made out of materials that had this graceful end of life, right? They made things out of bone, wood, feathers, stone, things that, were, around at that time. And in the last 100 years, we invented these incredible materials, plastics, which, by the way, I'm not anti-plastic. I think plastic is an amazing material. Quite frankly, we don't have a quality of life today without the abundance and ubiquitousness of plastic. But we just haven't taken the time to think through the end of life with these things. And so, our thesis of Pela case was, how about we just adopt better sources of material that actually do what our ancestors did, make things that actually go back to the planet responsibly, so Pela, which is the name, that's how it's Pela, and that's how people say it, but actual enunciation in Spanish is Pela, means peel. And it references to like an orange peel or an apple peel. That when you take it off and you put it in the ground, it actually biodegrades and becomes the food and sustenance for something new to grow. And so that, as the inspiration, is how we want to approach all end of life. And unfortunately, there was just not infrastructure for how compostable materials could actually be processed for end of life. So that's where we came up with the Lomi concept, is that we were looking for a way to give our phone cases their end of life. And along the way, we discovered that, well, actually food waste, this massive stream of, by the way, our ancestors used to not have food waste. They would take their food waste, put it into piles in their farm, because most of them are agrarian, and that would then be turned to compost. So it'd become fertilizer for the next crop. Well, now most of it goes into landfill. And when it goes to landfill, two things really bad happens. Number one, it's anaerobically buried, because it's in a plastic bag that gets covered in clay and or soil. So it releases methane gas as a result. And methane is like 80 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas emission. And it also forms leachate, which gets into the soil and leaches down into the water system. So there's two really nasty things that come out of that process. So this is something that was historically valuable. And we're just providing people a medium to harness that back and make it valuable again. And so the machine itself has the perfect level of heat, maceration, microbes, humidity that break down the organic matter into a dehydrated soil supplement that literally, when it's done, like I take mine out, I fertilize my lawn. It just goes right in my lawn. If you have a garden, you can actually, my business partner, he grows tomatoes, he's growing his tomatoes. And it turns out that it's a superfood. Like, it actually produces even better crops. And we've got third-party studies saying that this is true. It's not just us. We have universities saying, hey, you get 25% more yield. It's an incredibly valuable resource. So we're taking something that is disgusting, food waste, turning it into something delightful, and something that was garbage and turning it into gold, something of value, which is also addressing, there's a shortage of fertilizer, and there's also issues with soil degradation around the planet as well, because of monocrops and just yeah, monocrop harvesting has not been great for the soil. So it addresses a bunch of things. And then the unexpected grade is it sequesters carbon. So it actually is a natural decarbonizer as well. So yeah, it's pretty incredible to see the, how the small machine can actually have such incredible potential impact for creating more abundance on our planet.
Like I have the bio bins outside, and the one thing is when you open them, you just get attacked by a bunch of flies and everything. So this eliminates it. And the thing is, as you say, you just plug it in. And to be honest with you, I was checking it out. I was thinking, okay, is this going to cost a lot of money? But it's like less than 10 cents to run. It's not as if it's a high kilowatt thing. Yeah, I'd be correct in that. Say something. Yeah.
Yeah, depending on how you're powered, it's pennies to operate it. It's really non-consequential relative to electric cars and all the other things that we're moving towards. This electrification utility is actually very, very small. And the greater issue is what you're speaking about. I had a green bin program in Toronto for many years, and it was a blue job. Typically, as a man, you have to look after it. You take those little bags out of the kitchen that are usually dripping with goo, put it into the bin. As you say, full of flies or maggots or whatever. And then when I'd put it up to the curb, there was a 50-50 chance that raccoons or rats or some other pest would have gotten into it, and I'd be picking it up again in the morning. So this, again, takes something, going from that to putting your food waste in this, hitting a button, wake up in the morning, and it's dirt. It's something you can pick up. It smells good. It smells like coffee grounds, actually. It's completely delightful, and no more pest issues. And eliminating all that. And plus you take the weight, like it takes 80% and reduces it down to like 10%. So it's a very small output relative to what you put into it. So yeah, there's all kinds of benefits that just make the whole experience, again, from disgusting to delightful.
Like if you're growing anything with the crop rotation, that's why all the minerals are coming out, and they don't go back as they're chucked into the landfills. This way you're actually putting the minerals back into the ground, which in turn gives you a better crop output.
Exactly right.
And is it charcoal then that you have to stop the smell? Is it that because you change? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, carbon charcoal filters again, and actually those have about 45 cycles before they have to be changed out. And you just put the charcoal into the Lomi, process it, and it becomes a part of the output that's, again, healthy for the soil. So it's the whole thing is very sustainable in terms of how it's been designed.
And then there's I have it written down there, some pod or something like that you put into it as well. So what exactly is that doing?
Yeah, so the pod is like it's a probiotic tablet, basically. So the microbes that help break down the degradation process just give you a more healthy, faster, beneficial output. They're optional. You don't need to use them. I tell people, like, your dishwasher, if you use your dishwasher, you could put in dish soap or not. If you don't, they're still going to be cleaner than they would be otherwise. But, with the dish soap, it actually gets a better output. So similarly with the pods, you're just going to get a better quality output.
And similar with the charcoal. So if you were kind of not inclined to get that, it's just that it might have the smells but it'll still work away. Yeah.
Yeah, look, it'll work without charcoal. I don't recommend it because the smells are, the charcoal takes the smell out. There's a reason that, air filters have charcoal in them, and this is no different. This is a system to actually just alleviate and eliminate that altogether. So, it's very low cost.
Excellent. And I've just seen you're kind of like on the next model now that you've got the app and everything. So you might just let people know about the app.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're on to Gen 2. So the new one we launched is Lomi Bloom, and it is web-enabled, which allows you to track your cycles. So not only the machine is also better, it has better overall efficacy. It's quieter, more efficient. But beyond that, every time you run a cycle, you know how much waste you displaced, how much CO2 that was diverted as a result of that. But then we've also created something called Lomi Rewards. So turn your waste into rewards. And with that, you develop points. And with those points, you can actually earn products from partners that we've worked with, including things like replacement pods and filters and stuff like that, because we include our own merchandise in that. But we've created a marketplace where people can go in and use the rewards and get other products. And those products, again, are all in support of environmental consciousness and things that are actually going to ultimately have a graceful end of life and benefit the planet.
Excellent. And just finally, Brad, You're now an author. You've got a book, Startup Santa, which is kind of coming into Christmas for the launch. So a lovely present for people. I've just read the first chapter. I love your writing style, but you might just let people know what it's about.
Yeah, look, I didn't really want to write a book, to be honest with you. I had a couple things in my mind that I thought, world doesn't need more books, and certainly it seemed too daunting to write it. But I wanted a way to capture some of the things that had happened during my time in the world of toys. And as I started to write and share some of my chapters with friends, I said, it'd be selfish of you not to actually release this out to the world. So with that in mind, I turned into a project. So Startup Santa, Toy Maker's Tale of 10 Business Lessons Learned from Timeless Toys. So to that subtitle, every chapter features an iconic toy you would know, things like G.I. Joe's, Monopoly, Jenga, Etch-a-Sketch. Tells a bit of the history of those toys and what they teach us, because play is about our human development. So there's 3 things that happen through play. We problem solve, we learn social skills, and we learn how to develop our own personal skills as a result. And so I talk about what those toys are teaching us. I then tell a story from my life, typically a story of woe where I've failed and made mistakes, because we don't tend to learn from success. Success is a sucky teacher. We tend to learn from failing and stopping and reflecting about what we learned from that. And then I tie it together. And so these are the 10 principles that I've come across that have helped, I guess, become more aware of how to live a life more full and with more abundance. And I think it's also a fun themology as we move into Christmas.
Listen, totally enjoyed the conversation, Brad. You might let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, if you want to reach out to me personally, you can go to bradpedersen.com, and that's spelled with all E's as in echo and D as in delta. So you'll find out more about me and what's going on. If you want to find out about the book, go to startupsantabook.com. And there's actually a free chapter guide. There's some videos, some other things that we've included for your benefit. And if you want to learn more about the companies, I encourage you to go to Lomi.com, which is Lomi. Is that Lima, Oscar, Mike, Indigo, I think so. And then Pela.com is where we make the PelaCase.com is where we make the phone cases, and that's Papa Echo Lima Alpha Case.com. And yeah, there's more there you can learn.
Okay, perfect. I'll make sure I put all the links both on the audio and the video. Thank you very much, Brad.
Thank you, Roy. It's really great connecting with you, and appreciate our conversation today.
No problem. So you find everything about me on bio.link/podcaster. That's all for the Awakening, Meditation, and Speaking podcast. Until next week, take care.
So I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. You'll find everything about me on bio.link/podcaster with all my podcasts, and you'll find it, you see in the QR code in the graphic that's shown. I'd like again to thank my sponsors. So if you or someone you know struggling with anxiety and want to know how to be 100% anxiety free in 6 weeks without therapy or drugs, Daniel Packard's Anxiety Solution Program company offers a 6-week system that permanently solves anxiety at an astounding 90% success rate. People who join the program only pay at the end once they have clear, measurable results. If you're interested in learning more, go to permanentanxietysolutions.com, where you can book a free consultation with Daniel. Do you fight blood pressure and or want to get off the meds? Doctors are amazed at what Zona Plus can do. You can get a $50 discount with my code ROY, zona.com/discount/ROY. And you'll see it in the QR code as well as Daniel's QR code. Quality manufacturer of metal products for telecommunication and workshop equipment and other metal materials. You see the brochure there in the QR code, and let me know if you would like a quotation, shipped internationally at very competitive price. I'd like to thank all my sponsors and also all my listeners. Be sure to give me a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share with your friends, really helps. And I also have a video on how to give a 5-star rating, because a lot of people have wrote to me asking me that they don't know how to do that. Until next week, take care.